So Kim Foster made such a good point when she talked about Jay-Z and how because of our continual support of JC, because Jay-Z being, she's called it the fruitless example of like Black excellence, essentially. She just kind of talked about how our upholding of Black excellence in terms of like celebrity culture and being someone, like Beyonce and all these different things. Like she talks about how this upholding is making the rest of us suffer. And it makes you really start to question too, this idea of like the crabs in a barrel, because I really don't think that the crabs in a barrel was something that kind of like happened because we didn't want to see each other happy. I think it was more so realizing that there were only so many opportunities at the top. And you can look at that from a lot of different views. You can say, okay, yes, we know that racism and systemic equality kind of sets it so. We know that, most positions are afforded to people who are white. And you can also look at that from the standpoint of, okay, yes, people have different starting points. There are different privileges. Not everybody wants to be in those positions. Okay, that's like number two. Or you can look at this and just kind of realize just how when we live in society today, it's like, I don't know. I honestly, those are really the only two main points. And like, I don't know what the third point was going to be, but I want to stay focused because I just feel like this really struck a chord with me as she was saying this. There was this book I was reading. I didn't finish, but it was called The Good Enough Life. It's pretty lengthy. It's like philosophy, and it just kind of talks about where we are in society today and pretty much like going into more of a deep dive in terms of living a good enough life, and as we can clearly see today, people cannot afford to pay their bills. Landlords are buying out let's back it up. It's not landlords. It's multi-million-dollar corporations, billionaires buying out home properties and, setting up apartments in the ghettos and low income housing and pretty much funneling all that money to their corporations. There is no landlord. There is no maintenance man. So it's just like when you start looking at the world and where we are today, it's almost like you really do have to kind of start to question, what is the American dream? Like what, and I don't want to say American dream because I just feel like at this point so many people are talking about that. I'm more so like specifically honing in on Black excellence because I just feel like we're kind of at this point where it's like they got rid of affirmative action, right? They got rid of diversity, equity, and inclusivity initiatives and things like that at work. Like where are we today as a people and what does it mean to be excellent? And I think that this is kind of like, honestly, I feel like on a good day, like if I was like living in the perfect world, things would go back to being a bit more segregated. Yeah, I think that would be like the perfect world because I feel like right now what we've done, and honestly, it wasn't even us, right? It was corporations in this attempt to be more inclusive, which was really just like it was really just a hint for like make more money. I feel like we're at this place now where it's just like, because we're trying to be so inclusive, because it's a matter of a cash grab, right? Let me be a Black content creator, speaking to Black people, educating Black people in regards to African American issues. And let me try to speak to the white audience, right? Let me create this Black film that premises on educating Black people in regards to the racial injustices, the racism, the trauma, the exploitation, everything that they've gone through in the film industry to get films on TV, to fight for representation. Let me try to make this as palatable and digestible as possible for white people because there's a white audience. And it's just like, this right here is uprooting authenticity. As y'all know, like I've really struggled with this platform. Like it has been so hard recording on this platform because I'm just like, I don't know how else to be. Like I'm very authentic and I'm so sturdy that I'm not really here for being in the mix. Like I don't have a desire to because I don't feel like everything is for everybody. Like I don't even feel like this platform is for every Black person. You know what I mean? Like there's some Black people who don't care to hear what I have to say, who are not into it. They're not listening. It's not their mojo, and that's fine. But I just think for me, it's like to try to consistently create content that is original, that is authentic, that is even worth listening to while keeping this idea or this agenda, like, or let me just say motivator to be inclusive as possible is crazy to me. And I think it's so fake. And honestly, I'm so frustrated with it because I'm kind of going to go on a tangent, but it's so frustrating because I really just feel like only Black people have have to be the ones who are so inclusive. Like, only black people. Nobody is telling white people, oh, y'all need to let people in these big ass homes and these, y'all need to lend off one of them cars. Y'all need to give away some of that money. You need to let go of some of your CDs. You need to let go of some of them investments. You need to take some of that money out that S&P and give it to the poor kids in the community. Nobody is saying that. Nobody is saying that. Nobody is saying, oh, you know what? You got that pay cut. You got the new salaries for the new year. Why don't you cut some of that money to everybody else instead of giving that large salary to your mediocre, supervisor. Nobody is saying that. So it's just like, I'm just going on a tangent, but like, seriously, so it's just like, you kind of just get to this place where it's like, honestly, as a black person, I feel like I'm spread so thin. Like, I feel like as black people, we are literally just being spread so thin. And to me, it's just one of those things where it's like, it just poses such a red flag, because it's like, where are we today in society? Like, do we even know? Like, I just feel like we are at this point now where it's just like, it's getting crazy out here. Like, I know it's like, I'm not trying to be this cynic and be like, projecting fear, like raising red flags, or like, you know what I mean? Because it's not that deep, but it's just one of those things where it's just like the influence, the tactics. Like, I just see Meek Mill talk about how he's supporting Candace Owens. Like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, we just talk about the blatant ignorance and just how for so many people it's a cash grab. Like, the way the economy works, so we have the Fed, right? And the Fed is the treasury that holds all the money. So the banks get the money from the Fed. The Fed gets the money from the government, I think. It was kind of like a pretty bad history lesson. I'm still learning. I know I kind of just fumbled the ball, and I'm low-key dealing with a little imposter syndrome. So you kind of got to bear with me. But in summary, we're cash poor. And that's why things are going up, because when we don't have money, the banks have to charge more money. And that's why the inflation rate goes up, because there is no money. Like, we're cash poor. And so we're funding wars. We're funding all these different things. All this money is going to all these different things. We got all this modern day infrastructure that's going into large corporations' pockets in the name of like landlords and just like low income housing, public housing. Like, it's just like so much is happening within the economy right now. It's crazy. And like I said, this is a very general overview. Like, I'm by no means, I'm not that. So I'm not trying to be like, give you a lesson, but I do want to just kind of share what I've learned and what I'm seeing. And so the rich are low-key getting richer, but when you talk about black celebrities, as much as they don't really want to admit it, they're really cash poor. Like, liquidity assets is not something that many of them have. So for a lot of them, they are going to be partnering with those who may not be for the community. I mean, what do they care? They already sold us out by filling our communities with garbage, filling our communities with, guns and all these different things. So to turn around and move like that and say, oh, I'm standing with Candence Owens, like, it was just such a weak tactic, because it's like, do you even understand the implications of what you're saying right now? And honestly, I feel like for Candence Owens and for so many other black Republicans, y'all are just so vulnerable. Like, I feel like they are just very vulnerable to the point where it's just like, I have done so. Because here's the thing about African American history, and this is one thing I stress, because it's like, if black people educated themselves in regards to their history, which is so there, you need to educate yourself in every field. You need to educate yourself in terms of art and music and what is the history of that. You need to go to the jazz era. You need to look into the whole nine, because it's not just hip hop. Okay. It's not just rap. Like, you need to go into the whole nine. Then you need to look at sciences. Then you need to look at social studies and journalism and sociology. Then you need to look at psychology. Then you need to look at the medicinal field. Like, there's so many different things because you have to realize that you live in a country where you don't exist. Okay. You live in a country where you're subjected to being a worker. That is it. Like, that's your role. You don't realize it, but it's like, you are in a country. And I have to stress this enough, because I just think for so many black people, Candace, and I can't even talk about Candace Owens. I'm not even getting into Owens. I'm saying for just so many black people, you don't realize how much you just don't know. Like, you literally don't even know. Like, you are not even, like, you're not even close. Like, you're not even close. So you have to understand that, like, how much little you know. And so it's like, when you have these really powerful, and it's so unfortunate, but when you have these really powerful, influential leaders in the community and they go and they do things like this and they say things like this, y'all not understanding that all that is doing is getting revved up for the blatant disrespect in regards to Black people. Like, I just think that, like, it's really giving, like, who is going to protect Black people? Because I just feel like we're getting to this point where it's like y'all are building white people up so bad that they are getting so bold. Like, being on Twitter is crazy. Now, granted, I know that most of the white people on Twitter are very uneducated. Like, it's not really anything to be alarmed about. Like, these are people who are, uneducated, impoverished, and so forth. So it's not anything extremely alarming. But I just feel like seeing what white people think. And I think for so many people, it's just like, I don't know. I just think, to me, it's just something that genuinely concerns me. Like, I feel like it saddens me how for so many conservatives, for so many people who are like with Owens and all these, it's like even Oprah was like, I didn't even learn about African American history. Like, we know Oprah has been on her spiritual Eckhart Tolle tip, you know what I mean? Which is fine. I think that that's exactly what was needed in order for her to become as successful as she did, right? You need a different set of principles in regards to life. You need a more positive outlook in regards to certain things. But when you get educated and you just start to realize certain things, it's so different. And maybe Oprah did it right. Maybe if anything, we can say, hey, take this path. And then once you get to that certain point, maybe you can start to educate yourself. But I can't really see that being as so. I think, to me, the concerted amount of effort that goes into keeping Black people from learning their history is so scary to me. Like, it is a concerted amount of effort that goes into keeping you dumb. Like, and that is something that is so alarming. And so I feel like when you start, when you guys find yourselves in these spaces where you're listening to these conservatives and all they're doing is talking about how nasty Black people are, how this in regards to the Black, you have to question, like, well, why isn't that we don't talk this way about Asians? Why don't we talk this way about Hispanics? Why don't we talk this way about white people more specifically? You know what I mean? Why are we, Why are we attacking, very vulnerable communities, right? Like, it's always attack the gays, attack the Black. Like, it's never, okay, let's talk about, why. And we have to realize too, like, what has happened when someone has spoken out against white power structures, right? Like, look at Claudine Gay. She's a prime example. Look at Colin Kaepernick. I think as much as we want to be like, oh, it's just a very surface level thing. No, you have to really look at the intricacies of that. You know what I mean? And what has really taken place here. These people have been economically exploited. These people have been economically deprived. And so when you start talking about Meek Mill and him being in this space where, every Black man I've noticed who take this path, right? They want to be this rapper. They want to be the dope boy. They want to, go and sell violence to their community. When they want to clean up their image, their first plight is into conservatism. And they go far left, right, on the far extreme, far left down that path. And they start, like, Young Jeezy is a prime example, right? He goes, has his baby with Jeannie Mai. And it's just like, we're all just like, okay, question mark. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. They divorced maybe 6 months, a year or two later. And it's always kind of like this work to clean up their image, right? But it's never the work to say, how did I get here? What influence did I have? And how have I impacted my community? How can I work backward from the damage that I've done? No, it's kind of given like this scapegoat tactic to just go right into conservatism where there's little to no knowledge in regards to it. And I just think for a lot of people who want to kind of keep that money in their pockets, whatever the case may be, it's just kind of easier for you to get into a space where you're like, you know what? I'm just going to be someone who is going to join this allegiance, right? I'm going to make sure that my economic positioning stays intact because there's someone who's cutting my check, right? And it becomes this thing. And to me, I just think that is something that is so disheartening because it's like the fact that Black people can be so supportive of people who just literally spit in your face. Like, it's literally crazy to me. Now, outside of that, back to what I was saying about Kim's Foster video in regards to Black excellence and really how us obtaining or sustaining ideas about Black excellence being representations of Beyonce, being representations of Jay-Z, how that doesn't leave us room for any other ideas. And that, to me, not only does it hit home for where we are today in terms of aspiration, but I've thought about this in terms of the NFL. There was a guy that I follow. He teaches young men mechanical skills and things like that. And he's in there. He's talking to the kids. It's kind of like a pep talk type video. And he's just talking to them about the NFL. Like, you want to be in the NFL? You need to work hard. And I'm like, it's this right here that leads so many of, like, if I can think of a conveyor belt and you think about an idea, right? Just a few ideas, three paths on this conveyor belt. And it's almost like we send Black youth right off the cliff. You know what I mean? We really send them right off the cliff because it's like we don't give them any opportunities. We don't give them any opportunities to learn about anything else. We don't give them any opportunities to become something else. You know, it's always a matter of, do you want to be a rapper? Okay. You want to be a rapper? Okay. Do you want to be, in an NFL? Like, why? Why is those the only two options when there's so many things that need to be done within our community, but most importantly, things that need to be done within American society? There's a young man, I cannot think of his name, but there's a young man who went to Harvard. He graduated from Harvard. I think he was a senior this year, and he's so smart and so intelligent. Like, honestly, it's very commendable. But he was just talking about how, being in Harvard, he was encouraging other Black people, like, hey, I took the step. I went to school. I went to college. A lot of people are in the comments as African Americans, and they're talking about this and they're talking about that. But you have to be someone who gets out in the world and does things and makes a change. And I just think about how for so many of us, we never get to that place because we're so fed all these ideas about Black excellence being in the direct proportion, right? Being exemplifiers of celebrity culture, being a rapper, or being an NFL player. So it's like, if you don't have those three things, then what do you got? You know what I mean? Kids aren't even introduced to new ideas, right? Like when I was working within community centers, teaching kids about being a writer, become an actor. Here are the different things you can do in writing. Look at all these different opportunities in writing, right? Obviously, I'm a writer, so that was my subject, my area of interest. But it's just like, you just think about how there's so many opportunities out there and kids are not given any, right? It's like, okay, go to school to become an electrician when there's so many other things. And to me, that is heartbreaking, right? Like, that is the thing that sends so many people off the cliff. And so now here you are, and it's like you're just kind of left to the whims of people who don't even have your best interest at heart, but they have all the money. They have this idea, this consistent idea of what it is to be Black excellent, right? They have this very linear path. And so it's like the rest of us, the 99% who are not going to be famous, who are not going to be in that, we're left to our own torment. We're left to, stepping over one another in terms of this crab in the barrel. I think that that's the idea, right? Like, that's the idea. I don't think that it's, we don't want to see other people be successful. No, I think that we're all fighting for the same opportunities, right? And honestly, that's such a marker. Like, I gotta say that again because I realized I just broke this down in my own 2 cents. Like, we're fighting for the same opportunities. We're literally fighting for the same opportunities. Like, everybody's trying to be a rapper. Everybody's trying to go to the NFL. So inevitably, that's going to breed this level of competition because we know for a fact all 14 of us is not going to the NFL, right? We know for a fact all 8 of us are not going to be rappers. You know what I mean? Like, what are the chances? And so when you start talking about crab in the barrel, I don't think that it's, I don't want you to be successful. It's, we're all fighting for the same opportunities because to be Black and to be excellent, it's only existing in a very specific and very narrow vacuum and monolith. And that requires tunnel vision and that requires exploitation because we know that in these positions in itself, it's bred, fostered, and nurtured on exploitation, right? The exploitation of your ignorance. That's what births it. That's what keeps it alive. It's the exploitation of your ignorance. Like, you being someone who doesn't know any better. It just is a really sad thing. And so it's like when you start talking about what does it look like, to be Black and to be excellent, or what does it look like to just have a Black life? You know what I mean? Why does it always have to consist in these two extremes? That to me is like, that's the type of philosophy that makes my brain hurt. And I kind of want to elaborate when I was just talking about like conservative vulnerability. So first things first, I did an article about this. I thought about, I wrote about the conservatives' plight from victimhood, right? And this was during the Supreme Court ruling of affirmative action, right? We know Clarence Thomas was like very much for affirmative action. Like, he was the one who signed that. So that was the overruling of the affirmative action. And I started thinking about whether or not that could have possibly been, and this is before I had a little bit more understanding about certain things, and possibly I might have been giving Clarence Thomas the benefit of the doubt, but just hear me out. So I was thinking, okay, maybe he's doing this for our benefit, right? I was like, maybe there is something about being the only Black person in a room that is so traumatic. Look at Clarence Thomas, like, look how he turned out, right? He come from the same background as most people. And I said, maybe he's doing us a favor, because when we look at the consistent mental health and the consistent psychology and the consistent byproduct of being the only Black person in the room, we get this super packed vulnerability that almost like turns in itself, and like it turns itself upside out and like inside out. Like, it's crazy. It's like it turns itself inside out, you know? And when I look at some of the Black conservatives today who are so radical, who are people who just completely negate African American history, they are like, hey, this is what it is. I'm going to cherry pick this. I'm going to twist this. I'm going to be with some of the best, English professors and all of the, you know what I mean? People who are able to navigate this European world in which they built, right? Like, I'm going to be embedded in this very much polite culture that is consistent in its exploitation and bullying and, you know what I mean, twisting and siloing and, you know what I mean, eradicating anybody who comes up against me, right? I'm going to build this force, this almost like consistent force that is something that I feel like is very common within European cultures. I'm going to bake myself into this force, and I'm going to become someone who's invincible. And I think that this is why, despite this really nasty behavior of like attacking other people, whether that be like trans or, anybody else in a different community. And I'm not necessarily speaking solely to trans. I'm just more so speaking to communities that are somewhat like minorities, right? Communities that don't have the same power as a conservative Republican Party, right? And you were able to attack them because they're almost like the lesser, you know what I mean? The less viable, right? Like, they don't have the economic resources, right? They may not have the education either. And it's not because they're uneducated or they don't have degrees. It's just that they weren't educated at some of the Ivy Leagues because they weren't, they weren't able to just go to those schools because they didn't have the families to write them in and so forth, right? Like, they didn't come from that. So it's like you're standing on the side of the fence with people who are strong, you know what I mean? In terms of like American society, right? Like, clearly, if you're able to get a president fired, you know what I mean, who has worked really hard, like, you know what I mean? There's just so much there. So I just think when you start talking about like vulnerability, I think that is something that is really packed within that. And so I think my overall premise and what I'm really trying to say here is just like, when I look at that, I just think that this is the byproduct of being the only only black person in a white space. Like, I think that you come out very much changed. And I think that there's almost kind of like this self-hate that kind of mask itself as aggression and as anger and, kind of like bullying. Like, you kind of start to literally sit and bully other people. And that's why it's like, I'm always so confused when people are like, oh, Candace Owens for this and Candace Owens for that. And sure, Candace may have some great points. She may have some great references. But when we look at this body of work and how it's very insensitive, how it really lacks empathy. And you start talking about like being a woman and what does it mean to be a woman and how she's like, oh, she's the perfect woman and all these different things. It's like, what does that even mean? And I think the most unfortunate thing about anything is when you start to tell yourself something, you actually start to believe it. The more you start to tell yourself something, the more you start to believe it. And so my biggest question in regards to that is, it's so interesting how you can always be in these spaces and you're the person, and it's like, you get to, I don't know. I just think I'm losing my train of thought, but like, I think I'm rambling. I think I'm going to wrap up. But overall, it's just kind of crazy, how you can be in this space and you can be attacking other people, and how you are literally like attacking other people and people are applauding this. And I think people are applauding this, and especially talking about like the vast majority, is because it reflects you. I think when people say, oh, black people need to pretty much pick themselves up by the bootstraps, black people need to stop complaining about what they didn't get, what you're looking at, you'll look at people who are impoverished. You'll look at people who are homeless and you'll say, this is all black people, right? Like, I feel like so many of that rebuttal to me is deeply and heavily reliant upon homelessness and negative, not homelessness, but negative stereotypes in regards to African Americans, right? Like, it's not based on anything that's relevant, it's based on you believing negative stereotypes about Black people. And we know that, like, with Owen, she was adopted, so she didn't have that. She didn't really have an understanding of Black culture, of Black people. All she knew is maybe the few friends that she had, and most likely probably a lot of negative stereotypes. Like, if she was adopted, she probably came from deprivation. So it's like, when you're in those communities, that's all you see. You don't see Black people actually working. You don't see Black people actually, and I'm not talking about one. I'm not talking about just a relative, because she mentions her grandfather a lot. Like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who genuinely are out here, like, doing the work, like Black people who go to work, Black people who take care of it. Like, you're just not in it. So you just have this very negative mindset in regards to Black people. And what that does is then it translates onto other white people who may already have racist ideologies and attitudes towards Black people. And now it's just like, it's festering. And now you're pretty much just giving them leeway. You're saying, okay, if I disrespect myself, I disrespect my people, it's okay for you to do it. It's okay for us to disrespect anybody we want to disrespect. We have the power. You know what I mean? That's all this is about. This is about power, and to me, that is not ladylike. Like, and I think even outside of looking at it from that perspective, but I do have to kind of shine light on that, because I don't see how people can say that it's ladylike. What's ladylike about it? And I kind of hate how today is no longer a matter of critical analysis. I don't like how today is more so just a matter of just continuous rebuttaling. I don't like how today is just a matter of, like, critique, like endless critique and attacks towards one another, and we consider that critical analysis. Now, as much as people like to say what they want to say about American and institutionalized learning, I do believe that a college degree can somewhat mean something, right? But because we've really lowered we've lowered the barriers to entry for so many industries, there's a lot of people who are in journalism who don't really have the skill, right? And because talk is cheap, it's pretty inexpensive to get online and, like, share some thoughts and, so forth, which is fine. But it's like, we find ourselves in this space where it's like anybody can enter into the space and call themselves accredited. Once they build the platform, once they have that, that backing, then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is definitely a thing, So I don't know. I think that to me, it just looks like a very vulnerable position. I think that Meek Mill tweeting that was just, like, not really surprising. But, honestly, one thing I'm realizing with the world today is that everything is becoming very fake. Like, it's a lot of fake things. Like, there's not really anything that's real today. Most things are, genuinely speaking, like, they're really fake. And so if you're someone and you get so much of your news from the media, right? Like, we know that Sports Illustrated literally put out a AI article, right? It was written by AI. And I don't think that Sports Illustrated is going out of business, but they literally created an article, and it was literally written by AI. And I just think that that's very telling. Like, to me, it's like so many things are being tampered with, and when economics is a sole motivator. Economics has always been a motivator. Like, I don't think that, you know what I mean? But it's like where we are today, this is no longer a matter of, survival or, just possibly living a good life and thriving and just having some level of modesty. No, this was about greed, right? People wanted the most and the best of everything. And I just kind of feel like where we are today, that's a very dangerous thing. Like, greed being a motivator is very dangerous, so you can say, it's your side of the internet, whatever the case may be. I also want to sidebar here too. Like, I think when it comes to the work of journalism, reading and learning and so forth, it's not for everybody. Like, not everybody is cut out for this type of work. Not everybody is cut out for the news and world events and things like that. Not everybody is cut out for that. And I also think too, where we are today, honestly, it's definitely one of those things where it's like, if you are someone and you can't seem to turn it off, I don't advise. And this is why I said too, like, it's unfortunate because we don't really have college as an indicator anymore. But I feel like by lowering the barriers to entry, I just think that we've created more chaos and confusion in the lives of so many people. And I think what's unfortunate is if you can resonate with people's deeply, deeply, deep like emotions, right? And they don't really have the ability to kind of balance that with logic, then you can exploit people. And I think that's what so many people have done. And I think at the end of the day, all of this like idea of like Black excellence and celebrity culture and wealth and money and all these different motivating factors have done nothing but create a society of greed. But most importantly, it's just like we not only are we distracted, but it's like we're willing to do anything to get it. Like it's completely uprooted the moral system. Like everybody now, it's money is that is the thing. It's no longer anything else outside of that. So I don't know. That's just something to think about.